Timmy Joe reviews anything.
Reviewing computer parts on YouTube.
Woo! Gotta be pumped on that, right, Will? Computer parts! Woo!
Oh, yeah.
What's going on, people? My name's Timmy Joe, making videos about computers and all things video cards and things and games related. Appear all over the internet. Today on the program, as you no doubt saw from that clickbaity title, I have an opinion about some graphics cards here. We're going to get all into it and figure out what's going on with the Radeon 7 versus the RTX 2080 and see which one you should buy. And I have an opinion, okay, about this card. Because I've been using it for the better part of 2 months, and I actually really like it, especially now that drivers and MSI Afterburner updates have allowed for very easy overclocking on it. And you know what? It's a pretty awesome card. There's some good things to consider. I want to thank Jason. Jason, you're the man, buddy. Thanks for giving me this card. You're the absolute man. I love it. Okay, and I waited the 2 months to do the update because I missed the launch. The launch was botched. And now that we're 2 months in, I've been thinking about, you know, who's been doing any updates to this, especially now that you can buy them. They're available. You know, they weren't available at launch. They sold out right away. I want to thank MSI as well for loaning me the RTX 2080, even though that's not the intended purpose. But anyways, we'll talk about it near the end of the video. So, looking at YouTube, who's done any update to the Radeon 7? I mean, no one's talked about it since. I've been using it, and it's an awesome, valid card. Well, BBS Customs did a video the other day, beat me to it, and, you know, they saw the thumbnail. Do I still suck? You know, with this thing in the picture there. He obviously has an opinion that it sucks. And I was worried he was just going to shit all over it. I'm not really the biggest fan, or whatever. I'm not, doesn't matter. But, you know, going through his video, he did good work. He did, you know, check it out. And his benchmarks validate what I found with my own benchmarks. He just had a different opinion, that he doesn't like it. And it's probably because he has a RTX card that he likes better. You know, good for him. But before you run down to the comments and say I'm a fanboy for loving AMD and all that, watch through the video, see what I've got to say, and you can make your own considerations near the end. Because I'm not exactly leaning heavily one way or the other. Okay? So, let's get the elephant out of the room. RTX. Radeon can't do it. Okay? If you want to check out the latest and greatest ray tracing on all of what? 4 games that support it right now? Go ahead. I've turned it on with the RTX 2080 and the 2070 in Metro, in Shadow Tomb Raider, in Battlefield. Wow, pretty, you know, reflections. It looks all cool. But is it a gimmick? Yes, it certainly is at this point. It's, you know, you get to beta test some function that will get much better later down the line. There's no way you should buy the card for RTX, okay? The Radeon has some gimmicks to it as well. World's first 7nm GPU says it right up there. That's a pretty cool gimmick, actually. And they have a way better website. If it was on websites, I'd say, holy shit, that is a cool website. But there is one thing you can definitely say is better, for sure, on the Radeon. And that is 16 gigabytes of high bandwidth memory. Okay? And you might say, well, the RTX has 8. That's enough. Well, you could have said that about the 980 Ti. And, you know, arguably, it could use better, you know, ish. You know, it's probably not affecting it right now, but it might affect it down the line, like this 780 Ti only having 3 gigs, you know? So, you know, if you're looking for future compatibility and you're not someone that loves to sell off your stuff, you could keep this and later down the line play a lot of awesome games at 4K and maybe even some newer low-end titles and crank all the settings, and you're not going to have to worry about the VRAM on this. It'll come into play eventually. But 8 gigs is definitely a half-decent amount, so it's not like it's huge. But there's another thing wrong with the Radeon, okay? It's loud and it's power-hungry, and the RTX is way better for that. Well, we've got 2 very similarly priced items here. You can definitely get a way beefier 2080, but you're going to pay a premium, up to $100 or plus for a better cooler and more power draw, because this thing's only got a 6 and an 8 pin. This thing is definitely kind of power hungry, but I was able to apply a marginal overclock to both that I feel represented what the general user might throw on there and feel comfortable with dealing with sound levels, and the heat and noise and, the average frequency and stuff like that. These both are around 1700, 1750 for the Radeon. They're what's supposed to be boost clock, but they'll both go higher than that depending on how cool they are and stuff like that. But if you go into MSI Afterburner, you can squeeze out, I'd say, about 7 to 10% more performance with some quick settings. On the left, RTX 2080, I added 90 to the core, and I added 430 or 450, it's hard to see there, for the VRAM, and it was, cool, quiet, collected, no problem. Boosted between 1950 to 2000 megahertz, depending on the game, fairly consistently. And that was, pretty good for it. And considering it's supposed to only go up to 1700 boost clock, just adding a little bit to it. Might be a little bit of an overclock on that MSI model. But, and we see it only took about 432 from the wall with Heaven benchmark running at 1440p in windowed mode. Okay, go over to the Radeon side, and I boosted the boost clock up to 1925, and I put the power slider all the way over to the right, and then I added, actually maxed out, almost maxed out the memory at 1200, and it put the boost clocks between 1900 and 1950, but they'll only spike there for a second and usually be in the 1800 range because that's the way Vegas work. They just never stay at their boost clocks. Nothing like an NVIDIA card. But how does that translate into noise levels? Well, I've got some samples for you here. Listen up. Okay, keep in mind that that's worst case scenario. I literally have the computer pointed at me. Okay, that's just the way I had to set it up to do the capturing of the video on it. But you see there that, it is louder for sure at the same, performance and the same overclock, kind of deal. But it wasn't terrible. And I've had it in my Threadripper system for a while, and I played almost all of Devil May Cry on it. I've never been like, oh my god, my ears are bleeding. Nothing like an R9 290 could get, or a Vega 64 could get with the blower model. It's definitely an extreme improvement over those types of cards, and that was one of the biggest problems at launch. I just think the fan curve's been ironed out since then. I leave the fan curve on stock with this overclock, and I don't typically complain about the noise coming from it. And you see the power draw on it was only about 10 watts more at the same point at 1440p in Heaven benchmark. Now, it'll probably deviate by about 50 watts in a real heavy workload, but generally, it's not as bad as you'd think. It's not far off from an overclocked 2080. So it's looking pretty good, isn't it? Let's look at some benchmarks, synthetic styles. My favorite Firestrike, we've got actually our Radeon 7 beating the RTX 2080. It was beating it. Isn't that awesome? That's at pretty similar overclocks. It's a pretty good score, near 1080 Ti, a little bit overclocked level on the Radeon. That's pretty good. But the tides turn when you switch the type of workload. Time Spy is a lot more favorable to the RTX card. So you see that it gets the win there. But there's one little monster that we're forgetting about. And we'll talk about him a few more times before the end of the video. If we throw in the 1080 Ti there on a similar system, actually a little bit better of a system, we see that it takes the prize between these two graphics cards. It kills them in Firestrike. So, there's some consideration there. But if you throw in Time Spy, again, actually the RTX card comes out on top. So there's wins for all in this price category. Actually, 1080 Ti is not in that price category, but we'll talk about that later. So let's talk about actual gaming. I did a lot of benchmarks here. I want to thank Aver Media. They sent out a 4K capture card for me to review. They're 4K live, and I used it to grab all of the stuff you're going to see on the screen here. So I want to thank them very much. It's awesome that I can now capture 4K footage, even if I'm not uploading it to YouTube in 4K. But, and you'll notice that the MSI Afterburner logos are it's got some weird scaling thing with this capture card. It wasn't capturing text as well as it was the actual video output from the game. So, yeah, bear with me there, but let's go ahead and check out the benchmarks. And when we come back, we can probably drop some conclusions. Did you notice? Did you notice? He came out on top. But not a very big win. In fact, if you threw in more than just 10 games there, you'd probably see it right down the middle between these two cards. And if you got a better 2080 Ti, it would probably take the win with a heftier overclock. But I was very impressed that both these cards could run games from 2019 at 4K, 60 frames a second. In fact, all of those games were at max settings except for Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I had to go down to high to get 60 frames a second. And the Radeon won 7 of the 10 games there, but I checked out Shadow of the Tomb Raider at its highest settings, and when you flip that, the RTX actually comes out on top in that game. So that's weird. I would have thought it would have been the reverse with it being more VRAM on this card, but I think the conclusions drawn from that are they're both very good cards. And there's definitely some games out there that they need to turn the settings down a bit to get 60 FPS on a 4K monitor, but they did a pretty damn good job, which means high refresh rate 1440p monitor, both these things will kill it. And we're going to look at one actually soon, a 1440p 165 hertz monitor, so I'll definitely be using one of those for that. But yeah, great performance between the both of them. It's going to come down to the price. Well, you can actually buy this thing now. $699, or if you look there, the ASRock version is $20 less. So that's pretty cool. I think it comes with 3 games too. I won't say the games like The Vision and the new Resident Evil and Devil May Cry is what it is now, but it'll change down the line. Not a big deal, but there's a little bit of value added. There is games that come with the NVIDIA cards and deals as well. But let's look at the NVIDIA side. Well, I see 2 blower models there that are open box that are cheaper, but the newest card there, is $699, and it's this card I have right there, and it's $20 more expensive. So if you start doing the math, this thing does a little bit better in benchmarks, a little bit better in gaming than a cheap RTX 2080, and it's actually $20 cheaper, and I bet it'll even go down. I bet you'll see these go down before these. So it's starting to look pretty damn good for the Radeon 7. I'm actually pretty ecstatic that it came out that well, and that 2 weeks. I know that they really botched the launch, but 2 months after the launch, it's actually a really good value proposition to go with the Radeon, especially if you're on that team. So don't worry about it anymore. You can buy that if you want a high-end, video card. And yes, there's better versions of this that are more expensive that will, there's reasons to get the RTX for sure. But they're both pretty good. But we're forgetting about, I told you we'd come back to it, 1080 Ti. It's a no-brainer. It's got more VRAM than the RTX. It's going to last a little bit longer. Certain workloads are better with the new, the new process with the RTX 2080, but I would go with the 1080 Ti any day of the week for between $450 and $550, $650 for a really good model. There's tons of Strix ones on here for $450, $420. That's the real win there. So if you have to have a new card, go with one of these guys. I'll let you decide. Check what games you play and how it performs. You can make your decision. I personally really like the Radeon, and I'm glad that it's that good. It's not like last time where you could say the Vega 56 compares to the 1080, and it really didn't for a lot of reasons. And the board partner, good fan, heatsink versions didn't come out ever. Like, it took forever. It's actually pretty on par as far as I'm concerned. And unless you want to get a used one, that's the one I would go with. I would go with the 1080 Ti over both of those, though. But in 2019, this guy, we're almost in May, in late April, this guy's awesome. He's totally worth buying. I'm a big fan of him, and I'm going to keep him in my system for sure. But you can't go wrong with this guy either. So I'm at Watch Timmy Joe Instagram and Twitter. I didn't give you a definitive answer there, although the thumbnail and everything probably did, just so I get the clicks. But the end game here is that this is worth buying. It is, 100%. It just depends on what kind of gamer you are. And I didn't get into any sort of compute workloads or anything like that. That's not my forte. There might be, a reason either way to go with one of these cards if that's the kind of thing you're into. But as far as gaming goes, they're very equally matched. And with a price drop on this for $20, I'd probably go with it over the RTX 2080. Thank you very much for Aver Media for sending me over the 4K capture card so I could, check these things out and record their benchmarks live and stuff like that. I love doing that so I can actually prove I was doing the work to check all this stuff out. I want to thank MSI. They've actually lent me a Trident X 9700K system with this card in it. And of course, my first thought was, let's rip it out of there and put it in a totally different system. But you will see a review of the Trident very, very soon, as well as Corsair stuff coming up very soon. These mice are brand new and the embargo just lifted today, and I, should have probably done those videos first, but I've been meaning to get this out for a while because I think it needs to be said that this guy was discounted at the start for being just a terrible launch, and no longer do you have to worry. This thing is awesome, and it actually feels a lot like an NVIDIA card would once you run MSI Afterburner, like over Vega 64. It does a little bit better in the, the performance department and the drops, and actually plays well in games. I'm really psyched about it, as you can tell. I'll see you guys in another video. Thank you very much for watching. I don't know. Go out and buy one of these $700 cards, I guess is what I'm getting at. Links in the description. See you guys later.